Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the July exhibition night for the Channel City Camera Club. George Wellick, our club member extraordinaire, will do our introductions for our judges tonight. George?
Thank you, Bill. Yes, I'm filling in for Stuart Wilson, who's out traveling around the country as he does every summer. So our first introduction I'm going to do is for one of our professional judges, Christopher Broughton. Chris's quest in photography started at age 11 when he took his mom's twin lens camera to a summer camp, and the resulting 12 frames of film became the jewels of that summer. He completed both a BA and MS in photography at Brooks Institute, and he then returned to serve as a faculty member for over 20 years. He taught courses in digital photography, digital asset management, view camera, studio, zone system, fine art, and photographic theory. Chris spent 5 summers as a Brooks professor in Paris, and he has shared many of his Paris images with us in a great program night presentation he did on street photography. So Chris, thank you very much for judging for us, and glad to have you back.
My pleasure.
Our other professional judge tonight is Brent Weinbrenner. Brent is a freelance editorial and corporate location photographer, filmmaker, and multimedia producer. His stock images and video footage are represented by Getty Images and DV Archives. He earned an MS in photography at Brooks Institute and a BA in accounting at Indiana University. Brent taught introductory photography, location lighting, and the business of editorial photography at Brooks, and leads photo tours in Guatemala, where he recently made a long-form documentary film entitled Guatemala on the Edge of Discovery. Thanks for joining us, Brent, and glad to have you back.
Good to be here.
Our club judge tonight is Stephen Sherrill. Stephen earned a fine arts degree from San Jose State University, where he worked in multiple artistic media, including photography. He is an award-winning, internationally published photographer, having published 4 books of his work and working on another. His specialty is dance and live theater performance, and his work has appeared in numerous publications at home and abroad. He is a staff photographer for the UCSB Department of Theater and Dance, and the official photographer for the UCSB Dance Company. Thanks so much for judging for us tonight, Stephen.
Thank you for asking.
Okay.
Getting right into our program. This is the image scoring rubric. You've all seen it before. We start our exhibition with the creative conceptual editing category. Again, I won't take the time to read this. If you're watching it on a video, you can pause and read it. We'll get started with the first image from creative conceptual editing. And this is Embrace Wrinkles. The critique will be by Chris Broughton.
You know, I love the idea of creating layers and the metaphor that layers can both symbolize and be used to enhance a photograph. The one issue that I had with this photograph and a couple other photographs is we need to give our subjects a little bit of space to breathe, meaning that a little bit of they just seem to be too tight in my opinion. But then again, I'm the kind of person, I want to see the whole dance, and that means I want to see the feet, I want to see the hands, I want to see the ground. And I'm not saying that we need to see that. I just would have a little bit more space around my subject to breathe. Another thing too about when we create layers and we create dimensionality and we create depth, I keep thinking back to when I read about how Leonardo da Vinci created depth in a painting. And as things receded into the background, they became lighter. And not only did they became lighter, the contrast decreased. And if it was in color, it became more cyan. And this is how we, if you look out at the islands, normally This is how we create depth and dimensionality. And to me, I just wish that the texture layer on the face and the texture layer of the background, they could have differentiated it a little bit more, just to create some depth and space. I love the idea. I just think the execution could use a little bit refinement.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. Embrace Wrinkles scored 18.
The next image is intergalactic travel, and the critique here is from Stephen Sherrill.
I really enjoy this image because of its power. Obviously, the clouds have been enhanced considerably, probably a lot of texture and clarity and dehazing to really make those clouds pop. And I also like the steam coming out of the ground. It does look otherworldly. This is probably Yellowstone, I would guess. And I like the toning. It's very effective. But one thing that kind of bothers me is this little planet that's up here in the upper right-hand corner. It really looks like it was just kind of stuck on there as an afterthought. It does not look like it's in the sky. It looks like it's actually in the foreground. And if you look at the light on the clouds below, you'll notice that the light on that planet is on the wrong side. So at least we could have flipped that planet over to make the lighting match that of the clouds. There is another moon. You may not be able to see it, but it's kind of nestled in among the clouds there. And that works better because it does feel like it fits within the image a little better than the other one. And it blends in nicer with the sky.
Okay, thank you. Intergalactic Travel scored 21.
All right, the next image is Leaves on a Pond, and this critique is from Brent Weinbrenner.
I really enjoyed this image. I like the color palette. I thought the treatment worked well. The only thing that I saw that stuck out at me in the lower right-hand corner, there the treatment is a little bit different. It doesn't appear to be feathered in. There's more detail in the twigs, and that was it just didn't resonate with me, or that looked like a mistake to me. But I like the color palette and the content and the treatment composition as well.
Thank you. Leaves on Pond scored 25.
Our next image is Rapture in the Pasture, and the critique is from Chris Broughton.
I just want to tell everybody that I loved looking at your guys' stuff. I love seeing the ideas. I love to see the thought processes, both photographically and creatively, and when I saw this, it reminded me of the work of John Baldessari, some of the humor, and I thank him for allowing me to think that every piece of art doesn't have to be highbrow. With this illustration, I would say we've got to remember to create the illusion of distance, and by creating the illusion of distance, the perspective of the cow in the background, it's smaller. We know it's further away, but there needs to be haze. It needs to have less contrast to enhance that illusion of it being in the background. I love the path. I love how it leads up to the hill. I find it fun. This just makes me smile. I just think it just needs a little bit of refinement in some of the post-processing. But thank you for making me feel good.
Okay, thank you. Rapture in the Pasture scored 20.
The next image is Sea Level Rise. This critique is by Steve Sherrill.
This shot is taken in Venice, Italy, and this structure in the center is called the Bridge of Sighs. It's right near the Santa Maria della Salute, and I've gone under that bridge a number of times. This is a really interesting treatment. First of all, well, they have this condition in Venice called alta acqua, and 2 or 3 times a year when the stars align and the tides, they have a super high tide and the storm surges and whatnot. The water level rises in Venice and floods all the streets. And this is just something that the Venetians have learned to live with. But I guarantee you, it never gets this high. if it ever got to this level, there would be no more Venice. But the other part is that the color palette is sort of divided into three portions. You've got the blue of the sky, you've got the warm tones of the building, and you've got this sort of greenish color of the water below. And they're obviously compiled because they're so different from one another. For example, look at the blue of the sky and then follow down with your eye just below the bridge, and you'll see that it's not the same color as the rest of the sky. Also, water almost always reflects the color of the sky that's above it. And this water does not reflect the color of this particular sky. And the tones on the building are very warmly lit, where the sky is cool and the water is cool. But kudos to the photographer. This was a job. This was really a tough one to do, and I think he did a good job.
All right, thank you. Sea level rise scored 20.
Our next image is Strange Sculptures. The critique here is from Brent.
Okay. A couple things right away, following on Chris's theme about in the distance and a little bit of softness. Here there's a dead giveaway with the mountains are soft and out of focus, and the statue or ironwork is tack sharp. So that, to pull off an illusion, if the photographer wanted to, that should have been softened. I think the Photoshop work on the edges is a little bit rough. And so I think conceptually, I can't argue with it, but technically I would take a little more care to try to pull off the illusion a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. Strange Sculptures scored 18.
Next image is Zap. The critique here is from Chris.
I was one of those weird students back in the day. We did Crillian photography, where you could actually image something with electricity, and it wasn't the safest thing. And I thought this was brilliant. I thought it was done quite well. I enjoy the kind of the magenta color of the spark. I don't know if where each spark contacts, we need to have the little ball of light. So if I had to be ultra critical and find fault, I might just eliminate those little balls of light and just let the sparks emanate out of the actor that's performing on stage. I enjoy the the spotlight from above. I enjoy the haze of the atmosphere. So I thought excellent in all regards, but if you had to be critical, I might just eliminate those little contact round balls.
Okay, thank you. Zap scored 23. So for the creative edit category, we have 3 accepted images. First one is Intergalactic Travel, Jeff Lipschitz. Leaves on Pond, Zoltan Pushkash. And the last one is Zap, Stephen Sherrill.
All right, that brings us to our next category. This is the nature category. All of our regular rules apply, and this was a special assignment to deal with a common theme that is our special assignment in each category that comes up, My Pandemic Life. So with that in mind, we'll go right into the first of the nature images. The first one is called Dawning of Hope 2021. The critique is from Stephen.
I really enjoy the color palette here, especially the gradation from the blue at the top of the frame down through to the orange at the bottom. The God rays are really beautiful. They actually have filters that you can use to put these rays in post, but these are the real thing. You can tell because they are moving around the clouds, and you have a hard time faking that. But I think it's very beautiful. It's very peaceful. It's very calming and relaxing, and I enjoy it very much. The one thing that I would like to see is a little more of the ocean. I know the sky is the subject here, obviously, but to ground it a little better, I would like to see just a little bit more of that ocean below.
All right, thank you. Dawning of Hope 2021 scored 24.
The next submission is Descent into Darkness. The critique is from Brent.
I love this image. I think it spoke to me about my year. And I think that, you know, compositionally, it's beautiful. The posture of the bird going into that works nicely. I think the light on the top works well. The only thing I might have liked to have seen a little deeper tonality at the bottom, so it's a little bit darker, but that's the only thing that I would play around with that. But I think it certainly tracks well with the assignment.
Okay, thank you. Descent into Darkness scored 22.
The next entry is Entering Dangerous Waters. Chris, this is your critique.
One of the things I want to make sure everybody remembers is that when I look at a nature photograph, when I look at a photograph of a flower, you automatically are being compared to the ones that I've seen in my past, that I've looked at online, National Geographic, you know, all the documentaries we have about the Earth. So this is your competition, and while I think this is handled quite well, I mean, I love the mangroves, I love the idea of the leading lines, I love the highlights off the water. I'm left with, I kind of feel like it's a background plate. And there's a couple of nature photographs in here that are wonderful background plates, and I'm not quite sure what the subject matter is. And I really think most images should have something that we can be drawn into, and could all agree that this is the subject. I mean, is it the leaves that are coming down? Is it the incident angle off the water? And you could massage those by dodging or burning, which is totally legal in the nature category, just to direct the viewer a little bit more towards a single element. And if I had to remind everybody, landscape photographs like this, just like architectural photographs, when you pull depth of field, it should be throughout the image. And in the upper right hand corner, there is a branch or a piece of wood that is out of focus, and it's either shallow depth of field or it's focus stacked all depth of field. That's kind of the rules of the road as it is today. So I would figure out a way to either pull that into focus, and believe me, I deal with depth of field all the time. I work about 2 or 3 days a week at Decker's studio, and we have to take boots and photograph from the top down. So we're always doing composites. So to do a simple layer mask and pull that branch in the right-hand side, it's kind of going to be a requirement, I would say, for landscape photographers in the future. So practice your skills, and you don't need to do focus stacking software or any of that. Just take 2 pictures, simple layer mask.
Okay, thank you. Entering Dangerous Water scored 20, 2-0.
The next image is Exhaustion and Hope. The comments are from Stephen.
This image is a lesson that the beauty of a blossom continues beyond the prime moment in a flower's cycle. there is beauty still there, even though that blossom is not in its prime. And the composition is good. It's well placed in the frame. The subject is nice and sharp. There's good control of the depth of field. I do feel that it could be a little bit bigger in the frame. And I would recommend cropping some off the left because there's really not too much happening over there. And also at the bottom, that large blurry blossom at the bottom, I'd probably crop up to right about near the center of the middle part of that blossom. And that I think would focus more attention on the subject and make it stronger compositionally.
Okay, thank you. Exhaustion and Hope scored 21.
Next image is First Rose of Spring, and the critique is from Brent.
My first comment is that I think the lighting ratio is a little bit too severe. I'd like to see some fill. If we're emulating nature, we don't see this very often, if ever. The water droplets, there's so many of them. I found that to be a little bit distracting. My eye never rested. But my major beef was with the lighting, and I would have liked to have seen a lot more fill in that.
Okay, thank you. First Rose of Spring scored 18.
Next image is Giving You the Finger. Chris, you get to talk about this one.
Again, if I could resort to complimenting John Baldessari and how he brought humor into art. And you know, to me, I would have thought the exact same thing if I would have saw this or seen this saguaro cactus. But the one thing I would remind everybody is when we take pictures of plants, we're also doing portraits. And I don't know the name of the cacti that's in the foreground that's in front of the, I believe it's a saguaro. It might be a cardone cactus. I don't know. I would have just shown the base of that cactus in the foreground. The color palette is a little bit, I would say, soft and muted. You know, a hot, kind of hazy summer day, which I can agree with if you're trying to accentuate the whole idea of the heat. I just might try to even out the sky on the lower left horizon just a little bit, just so it doesn't draw my eye over there.
Okay, thank you. Giving You the Finger scored 20, 2-0.
The next one is In the Weeds. Stephen, you get the critique on this one.
I really, really enjoy this image. It shows movement, the good use of depth of field. I've tried shots like this before, and they're not easy. Oftentimes, if I get in a situation like this where the subject is blowing in the wind, I'll shoot a burst, because generally you'll get one frame out of a small burst that is better than the rest. Now, if you look almost to dead center, you'll see 4 or 5 of these little seed pods that are sharply focused. And I think that works really well. I think that improves the image. It gives your eye a sort of an anchor point. And I think that works really well. I think the lighting is just gorgeous, and I love the golden light of the sun setting just out of the frame on the left. I think it's a very, very successful image. I like it a lot.
Okay, thank you. In the Weeds scored 22.
Next image is Joyful Post-Pandemic. Brent, this one's for you.
Okay. I love the color palette, the contrast between the purple and the yellow, and then the center of those purple flowers picking up the yellow as well. I might have moved in a little bit closer on the flower in the foreground with a view towards making it a little bit larger in the frame, but also throwing the background a little bit more out of focus so that it's still readable as flowers, but maybe a little more suggestive rather than literal. But the color palette is the thing that grabbed me right away. But I would just, I think, pull in a little bit tighter and accentuate the purple. And I like the leading line of the stem as well.
Okay, thank you. Joyful Post-Pandemic scored 21.
The next image is Mountain Columbine Serenity. Chris, you're up on this one.
Boy, you're hitting us with some beautiful flowers. Remember all the flowers that we've seen, and this is definitely a beautiful flower. Small critique, either shallow depth of field where it's going to be a razor thin, or we're going to have to pull all the flowers, and the flower in the back starts to fall out. I think everybody would benefit from learning how to do a little bit of focus stacking or a little bit of layer masking. And this would be very, very simple, where the center group of flowers would be sharp. Change your focus slightly, photograph the second on the upper left group of flowers, and just layer them together. I know you can't do it in post, but I also would have bent down and blown that one leaf off the bottom left. In other words, it looks like one of the flowers dropped the petal. I mean, if the photograph is going to be about perfection, it needs to be perfect. The dead flower, I think, was just the opposite, and it showed the beauty of what was a flower. But this is kind of showing what is a flower. I also think it might need just a slight little bit increased in saturation. It seems a little pastel and washed out for being a realistic versus an interpretive type of a photograph. I don't know if the cute little bug, I mean, it doesn't bother me at all, but I was just, kind of curious if this was an entomological. Now, my brother had his degree in entomology. You think I could say it right? I don't know if this was a study of an interaction of the insects and the plants, or you might wanted to shoo the bug if you're going to knock off the little leaf down on the lower left as well.
Okay, thank you. Mountain Columbine Serenity scored 21.
The next image is My World Got Small. Stephen, this is yours.
Thank you. We see so many photographs of insects, and we see so many photographs of bees. They're a very popular subject. But this one works really well. The control of the depth of field is very good. It gets a very nice soft background. But the eye of the bee is tack sharp, and they always teach us to focus on the eye, and that's exactly what the photographer did here, and did it very well. Now, the shutter speed must not have been too fast, because we completely lost the wings. They're just a faint blur, and maybe his world got small when his wings fell off. I don't know, but the image works very well, even without the wings. If it were mine, I think I would crop it a little bit. I'd like to see it a little bit bigger in the frame. I'd definitely take some off of the left, and some off of the bottom.
All right, thank you. My World Got Small scored 23.
Next image is Outpost. This is critiqued by Brent Weinbrenner.
I love the composition of this. I think the lines are really wonderful. I like the bird facing out of frame. It projects strength. There's a little bit of a moment there with the bird. I might have liked to have seen a little bit more saturation in the sky at the bottom, but compositionally, I fell in love with it. I like the strength of it.
Okay, thank you. Outpost scored 21.
The next image is titled Pandemic Patience, Watching Cactus Grow. Chris, this is yours to critique.
I'd say it's really beautiful. My only comment, and I say this a lot. Um, the only thing I put in the middle of the frame is when I'm shooting paper targets at a shooting range. Your camera is not a gun. Um, Move it to the right, move it to the left. Either way, I'm fine with. Move it up, move it down a little bit. Either way, I'm fine with. And I would use the negative space with and play with the vertical lines, because the verticals of the background are, are like the complementary of the circle of the flower. And since we're talking about the verticals, I just might open up the shadows just a teeny bit so we can see those beautiful vertical lines in the background. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Pandemic Patients Watching Cactus Grow scored 21.
All right, the next image is Peaceful. This is Stevens to critique.
I really, really enjoy this image. I love the multicolored layers that fade off into the distance. The time of day is also very, very helpful. It brings out the long shadows and greatly improves this image. The colors in the foreground are repeated again and again as it fades off into the background. And there's this one spear of yellow that shoots right across the center of the frame that gives this image more interest. And I love the placement of that single tree on the tip of that yellow spear. And I think it's very successful.
Okay, thank you. Peaceful scored 21.
Next image is Pre-Pandemic Freedom. Brent, this is yours.
Okay. I like the image. I would have probably worked to eliminate the little bit of grass at the bottom of the frame, either by cropping up or else moving the whole frame down so that we can see where that grass originates. I would also work with the crop and maybe move the whole thing a little bit left so I can see the full cascade on the left-hand side. I think the shutter speed works pretty well. Maybe drag it another third or 2/3 of a stop to smooth it out even more. I don't know what kind of breeze there was that day. But I would just look at the details at the edge of the frame and make sure that you have the most action in the water and the least clutter on the edges.
Okay, thank you. Pre-Pandemic Freedom scored 21.
The next image is Social Distancing Applied Everywhere. Chris, this is yours to critique.
There should be a surreal category, because this
Mhm.
definitely can fit into that category. I like it. That pure and simple. I enjoyed trying to figure out what was in the background after I spent a lot of time working my way around the different spheres, trying to see what was behind it. All I could think of is that this is a Randy's Donuts in another universe, that the donuts are purple. But no, I thought it was a wonderful capture. The macro world is amazing and mesmerizing. Whether or not this is morning dew on some sort of web, and I would say the depth of field that they did a pretty darn good job. I wouldn't want everything to be tack sharp, because then it would look, I would say, convoluted, like it was created, not necessarily seen. But I'm still, I want to know what it is, but I don't want to know what it is, because since I don't know what it is, it keeps me engaged in looking.
Okay, thank you. Social Distancing Applied Everywhere scored 22.
Next image is Suspended, and this is Stevens for critique.
So here we have another aged flower, along with an aged judge. Um, but I can, I can't express enough or accentuate enough that a flower does not stop being beautiful once it goes into its later phases of life. And this is another good example of that. The photographer did an excellent job of focusing on the subject, nice control of the depth of field, nice softness in the background to separate the subject. It's well placed in the frame. There's a nice color contrast between the warm colors, the red colors of the blossom, and the green colors in the background. It's really well done, and I enjoy it very much.
Okay, thank you. Suspended scored 21.
Next is the color purple. Brent, this is yours for critique.
I get all the color palette ones. I love the color palette on this. The purple comes as a surprise. I might give it a little more breathing room at the bottom. And I don't know what other angles of view there were to maybe provide slightly different geometry in the background, still tying this flower to the balance of the plant, but I'd like to see a little bit more separation between the foreground element and the background element, just spatially. And again, a little breathing room at the bottom, but I thought the lighting and the color palette worked really well, as well as the focus.
Okay, thank you. The color purple scored 23.
Next up is tree swinging. Chris, this is
Beautiful depiction of movement. I believe movement is just as much about photography as still and sharp. My only criticism would be I just might open up a little bit of the shadows a little bit more on the left-hand side of the frame, just so it has a little bit more of an open feel of the forest and of the movement of the simulated swing from the tree above.
Okay, thank you. The tree swinging scored 22.
next is upstream. Stephen, this is yours to critique.
This is really a fun image. The composition is strong. The placement of the subject is good. A common rule in a lot of images is that you want your subject to be moving into the frame rather than out of the frame. But I think the fact that this bird is where he is works very well in this particular instance. The poor guy looks like he's really bucking the wind. You can see the feathers on his head fluffing up. You can see the water on his feet blowing. And it really is, you can almost feel that bird pushing, trying to get through that hard wind. And the fact that his head is turned away from the oncoming wind is just what you and I would do if we were walking into a stiff wind. The one thing that I would like to see out of this whole image is I'd like to see his eye a little sharper than it is. And I think you could probably get in there with an adjustment brush and maybe kick up the texture or the dehaze or the focus and sharpen that eye up just a little bit. Otherwise, I think it's great.
Okay.
Like living in Chicago.
Yeah, that's it.
Excuse me. Upstream scored 22.
Next image is winter landscape. Brent, this is yours.
Okay. A couple things. The horizon line, I would like to either see blue sky all the way from left to right, or perhaps none at all. I think in my view, the subject doesn't have a central point of focus or interest. I see the potential with the leading lines, or not the leading lines, but the curves. It might have worked better to get on the other side of that tree and gotten an uninterrupted S sweep. But my biggest beef with it is that I don't know where to go with it with my eye. I just don't see a central point of focus. But I would watch the horizon line as well.
Okay, thank you. Winter landscape scored 19. So for the nature category, we have 16 accepted images. First one is Dawning of Hope 2021, Ron Abels. Descent into Darkness, Don Green. There we go. Exhaustion and Hope, Bill Banning. In the Weeds, James Folsom. Joyful Post-Pandemic, Bruce Straits. Mountain Columbine Serenity, Charlie Henry. My World Got Small, John Stoopnagel. Outpost, Stephen Sherrill. Pandemic Patients Watching Cactus Grow, Dave Basso. Peaceful, Ellen Clark. Pre-Pandemic Freedom, Pat Birdsell. Social Distancing Applied Everywhere, Chris Seaton. Suspended, Carrie Topliff. The Color Purple, Bob Rottenberg. Tree Swinging, Judith Barrett. And Upstream, Sally Berry.
All right, that brings us to the open category. We'll get started with a critique from Chris Broughton on the image At the Gym.
I really enjoyed the post-processing on this image. The way it made it look almost like an illustration. But the one departure I would say, the diagram on the wall, the plant on the lower right, it seems out of place. I don't know if it needs a little bit of treatment to make it work with the rest of the image. It's kind of like it looks like it's from a different photograph. I might just select that area and put maybe a slightly negative texture or maybe a negative clarity, just to give it a little bit of a glow to kind of match the man in the mirror's skin. Because then I think it would be the complete package.
Okay, thank you. At the Gym scored 23.
Next image is Box Full of Luck. Steve Sherrill, this is yours.
I really love this image. I have had some association with horse people in my past, and this really tells a farrier's story. That's a farrier is the one who shoes horses. Having worked in the trades, worked with my hands all of my life, I have noticed from time to time that there is some beauty and some interesting composition in piles of leftovers, wherever you are, whatever you may be doing. And most people will never look at the trash pile twice, but sometimes there's some interesting things going on in there. The lighting here is exceptional. It really draws the viewer's eye into the center of the frame. And I love the old nails sticking out through the horseshoes. It's very well done.
Okay, thank you. A Box Full of Luck scored 23.
Next image is Columns. Brent, this is yours for critique.
This is really trippy. I want to go see this for myself. I played around with cropping just to add to the surreal nature of it, is turning the camera down a little bit, more of the stones in the foreground, and cropping the image above the cliffs to give it even less of or give it more of a surreal sense. I think the content is what carries this image. I think it's well constructed. I like the little bit of a window into the far distance in the left. So I think it's a fun image, and I think just a few. I'd love to see some not alterations, but options, and again, maybe a crop down.
I hope the photographer will share this location with the rest of the club, because I think there's a lot of us that would like to go see this.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Column scored 21.
All right. The next image, Cycling Home. Chris Broughton, this is yours.
So to me, again, I love motion. I love blur. I love the idea that we have two different elements of time within the frame. But the subject's disappearing. The subject needed to be wearing light colored clothes. The subject kind of disappears. I don't know if in post they could bring them out a little bit. You probably could. I don't. This looks like Amsterdam or one of those cities that there's a lot of bikes. Maybe it would have just been I call it fishing a background, just waiting for another person to come by with the appropriate attire on, because I want to see the bicyclist. I love that this bicyclist is juxtaposed against two stationary bikes. To me, I love the idea, and maybe it just got to get that one more character to go through, or in post bring them out,
Or just a little less shutter drag, so they're a little sharper, still with motion, but a little more defined. But yeah, I had the same sense as you did.
Okay, thank you. Cycling Home scored 22.
Next up is Don't Try This. Stephen, this is yours.
This looks like it was taken on one of the club field trips, if I remember correctly, a few years ago. And I don't know the name of this creature, but he has a very interesting characteristics. Apparently, he lacks tears, and so he has to lick his eyes with his tongue in order to keep them moistened. Just amazing. I've never heard of or seen any other creature that does this. It's pretty amazing. The composition is good. It looks like the subject fits well in the frame. It also looks like the subject was lit with a strobe, very harsh, bright, specular light. The eyes are tack sharp, which is what we're all aiming for. But in this case, I would like to see the nose a little sharper. It disturbs me that's not quite as sharp as the rest of the critter.
Okay, thank you. Don't Try This scored 21.
Next up is Faded Beauty. Brent, this is for you.
I really like this image. The tonality is beautiful. The tone matches the condition that the vegetation is in. My only comment was that I might crop in on the right hand side a couple of inches and take away the highlights of the secondary element in the frame, so that more attention is drawn to the flowers and not so much to the right, because I don't think it's adding to the image that much. But the tonality and the treatment's beautiful.
Okay, thank you. Faded Beauty scored 25.
Next is First Light. Chris, this one's for you.
I don't want to sound like a repetitive record, but don't put these suckers in the middle of the frame. I mean, it's kind of like an Olympic torch. I would work with space. Put it on the right, put it on the left. It's going to be a challenge. Compositionally, I would recommend that whoever shot this, try composing with your other eyeball. And this really worked for me. Switching the other eye forces the other side of the brain to exercise the rules of composition. And I think, and I know I do, I come up with different solutions. And I've also noticed, believe it or not, if I'm looking, instead of looking through the eyepiece, I'll switch eyes. And the other thing is that I will look at the back of the camera screen, and then I'm using both eyes. And that's something that is very different in when you're composing than looking through one eye. So I would recommend trying that.
Okay, thank you. First Light scored 18.
Next up is Fishing the East Walker River. Stephen?
This is a very pleasant and relaxing image. It's sharp from foreground to background. I enjoy the lazy S-curve of the river. The sky is well exposed. And the orange of the fisherman's jacket helps to separate him from his surroundings. But I want to see more of him. In my opinion, if he is the subject of this photograph, he needs to be larger in the frame. And you do have some real estate you can give up on the right and maybe down at the bottom and on the left. And just, you'd be amazed. Just, you don't have to trim that much more off of the image to really bring that subject figure out.
Okay, thank you. Fishing the East Walker River scored 20, 2-0.
Next image is Floral Fantasy. Brent, this one's your critique.
Okay. I really enjoyed the treatment. I love the glass and the way it's glimmering and the tabletop. I might float the tabletop in space by eliminating the stem, either burn it down or crop, so that we don't see that. On this, it doesn't bother me that it's dead center. You know, it's hard to see the edges. So I think the image works quite nicely. I just maybe float the whole table.
Okay, thank you. Floral Fantasy scored 22.
Next image is Fly Away. Chris, this is yours for critique.
I think, you know, the imagery of the pelican is beautiful. I do not know if this is real or this is a composite. It doesn't really matter, but to me, it looks like a composite. So even if it's a real photograph, it looks like a composite. I might just try to maybe reduce the contrast of the background just a little bit to, again, sell that whole idea of depth. Things that are further away, there, because of the, you know, we're at the ocean, the haze, there will be a decrease in contrast. The other thing too, I like space either on the right or the left, just a little bit. Either way, if he's moving from left to right, leave space in the right for him to flow into, or he's going so fast, leave space on the left, and that's where he's coming from. Since this is an open category, draw a 2-inch box, content aware fill, and then you got me happy. But if it's nature, you can't do that.
Right. Okay, thank you. Fly Away scored 22.
Next is Gone to Seed. Stephen, yours for critique.
I think it's the colors that give the strength to this image. I love the gradient of the deep blue of the sky up on the top, fading down to the orange of the sunset in the bottom. I like the green of the hills, but I feel that perhaps everything is a tiny bit oversaturated. I'd like to see the image also without the hand. I know that's pretty hard to do at this point, but the one thing that bothers me is the light on the little finger of the hand at the very bottom. And if I couldn't eliminate the hand completely, I would at least crop up from the bottom to eliminate that little glint of light on the little finger that pulls my eye to the bottom.
Okay, thank you. Gone to Seed scored 21.
Next one is Hope for the Prisoners of Opinion. Brent, yours to critique.
I like the concept. I'd love to see some detail in the highlights. And I'd also like to see the barbed wire, I think, come up a little bit more into his forehead above his eyes so I can see into his eye. And I'd also like to see, you know, some what it might have looked like to have that barbed wire have some dimension or curve to it. But I think the concept is great. And my biggest beef technically again is the highlights. And maybe the placement of the wire works because it does create tension by not being able to, you know, clearly see running across the bridge of his nose.
Okay, thank you. Hope for those prisoners of opinion scored 22.
Next one is Inversion. Chris, this is for you.
When I saw the simplicity of this diptych, I was just like, wow, this is wonderful. It reminded me of the Japanese writing, or I don't remember it. A friend of mine told me that there's an art of when you drop things randomly but it just created this wonderful space. I played around and toyed with the idea, which one do I like more? Do I like the dark field or the light field just as a single image as well? And the reason why is that in the past I put key lines around things and they looked fun, but when I made a print and I displayed it, the key line around it looked a little juvenile. In other words, it looked like it was an afterthought. And I wanted to see how could the images just stand by themselves. And I thought, well, if you made the background white, then we would lose separation on the one on the right. And if you made it black, then of course you would lose the separation on the one on the left. So I thought, well, maybe if you made the background either just off-white or not pure black, because the key line, I don't think you really need it, because it competes with the beauty of the broken stems themselves. And I love the organic nature of the curves. And when you got those hard lines around it, it just took away a little bit from me. But I thought the images were wonderful, beautiful.
Okay, thank you. Inversion scored 26.
Next one is It All Falls Down. Stephen, you're up.
Thank you. Now, this is one of those ancient temple ruins, perhaps in a place like Thailand, or maybe even jungle areas of South America. I can't exactly pinpoint the location. But what is amazing to me is the level of craftsmanship that went into these structures that are probably thousands of years old. And it's also amazing, after all that time, after all those centuries, what survives and what doesn't. I want to call your attention to the hands of these two figures. These delicate little fingers are still intact after all this time. And that's incredible, especially when you see how the rest of this building is crumbling. It's the image itself fills me with a sense of mystery. I think it's well composed, it's well focused. However, I feel that the foreground elements are a little overpowering. And, you know, they always tell us, you know, you need to have your foreground, middle ground, and background to create a sense of depth. But in this case, I think you could lose a little bit of that bottom, and perhaps a little bit from the left, stone-like thing sticking into the frame. My phone is ringing and it's tied into my computer. So if you heard that, that's what that was.
We lost the image too. At least
Yeah.
I did.
Oh,
It should come back. But
let's see what we can do here.
there we go. Can you see me?
I can see you, but I can't see the,
We lost the PowerPoint, not you.
there we
There
go.
we go.
Oh,
Okay, but no, it's still not. Hold on.
That drives me crazy. I don't know how that happened, but every time my phone rings, it takes over whatever I'm looking at on my computer screen. I don't know how to disconnect that. I would sure like to know how to do it.
okay, you're back.
Okay, I think we got it. Good.
So I think I said what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. It all falls down, scored 18, 1-8.
And the next image is Living on the Edge. And Brent, this is you're up for this one.
All right. Nice use of the wide lens to give us, infinite depth from foreground to background. The spot of color in the foreground works beautifully. I don't know if the subject matter is strong enough to carry the image. I'd like to see, it's a small thing, the cloud that's obscuring the peak in the background. My eye keeps going to that. I think I'd like to see the top of that peak. I would just work this area harder and see if there's another stronger set of elements.
Okay, thank you. Living on the Edge scored 20, 2-0.
Next image is Old Spanish Knights. Chris, you're up for this one.
Well, the print that's on display at the museum actually is better than the digital file. I usually it's the other way around. But to me, it's interesting. All this heavenly bodies that we are now photographing. I thought this one was handled quite well. I thought the print gave me a different view of this, and the foreground of the trees and the bell, I think, was warmer in the print than we see on here. And I actually like the warmer, the amount of warmth. But I do question, to me, we've chopped off the bottom of the tree, we've chopped off the bottom of the bells, and I need to have a foundation in the frame. And whether or not why I can't see it, I don't know. And I think that would just enhance the image if I could at least see the bottom of the tree trunk.
Okay, thank you. Old Spanish Knights scored 22.
Next up is Orange Dust. Steve, you're up for this critique.
This image has kind of a mystical feeling about it. It looks like it might have been taken during one of our recent lunar eclipses. I like the placement of the subject in the frame. And I would like to see it cropped a little bit. I think it's got more space around it than it really needs. Someone, I don't know if you can see it from your computers, but there's a tremendous amount of either digital noise or grain. Now, it could be grain, but I'm not really sure that the photographer didn't add that grain intentionally. So I'm gonna say I'm good with that. Either way, it works for this image. It adds mood to the scene, and the stars are round and not streaks. So we know that the shutter speed was fairly high, and I think it works really well. I would crop it just a little bit. But other than that, I really like it.
Okay, thank you. Orange Dust scored 22.
Next up is Painted Sky. Brent, you're up.
I love the color palette. I think that the sky is certainly dramatic, and it's taken at the exact right moment. I'd like to see perhaps just a little bit more detail in the landscape. I wouldn't want to ruin the mood, but I'd like to see a little bit more deeply into that. But I think the sky is really pulls the picture.
Okay, thank you. Painted Sky scored 20-0.
Next is Spring Trail. Chris, this is yours.
Again, one wonderful path that leads us through the photograph. It's kind of interesting too that the path is this cool blue, which is the complementary color of this warm light that the tree is basking in. I do feel a little bit that it's a background plate. I mean, I want a coyote to be coming down the trail. I want a couple hiking, a mountain biker, just something, because I don't think the trail is strong enough to be the subject matter. That I'm kind of like, where's Waldo? And it's like the perfect path to create this narrative about this journey. And it could be somebody jogging up the hill. It could be a nature shot where an animal is coming down. I just feel that there needs to be one more element, and then it would be complete.
All right, thank you. Spring Trail scored 20-0.
Next is Over Bodie, critique from Stephen.
I have to visit Bodie one of these days. A lot of my photographer friends would say, "You haven't been to Bodie yet?" Oh, no, I'm afraid not. But I will. I promise. I will go someday, first chance I get. I've seen a lot of shots at Bodie, and this one is very successful. The sky is just incredible. The sky alone has the full range of tones, all the way from near black to high white. And the old weathered wood of the buildings, the dry grass in the foreground, all add up for a very powerful feeling.
Okay, thank you. Storm Over Bodie scored 21.
The next image is Surf's Way Up, dude. Brent, this is yours.
Yeah, it is way up. I really got a kick out of this image. I'm trying to figure out where in the world it might be. I love the geometry of it. The straight vertical lines. Oftentimes verticals are a little bit canted, so as an architectural photographer, it's refreshing to see that it's perfectly straight. One thing, and it's really a tiny little nit at the bottom of the frame, there's something that's coming up just out of his shadow, and I'd like to see that eliminated, and that kind of give us a perfection of cleanliness in terms of the geometry. But there's two little shapes there, but nice moment, and I'm in awe of the ocean.
Okay, thank you. Surf is Way Up, dude, scored 22.
Okay, this next one is Tourists. Chris, this is for your critique.
When I saw this, it reminded me of the British photographer Bill Brandt, kind of the Henri Cartier-Bresson of England. I loved how the lattice of the shadows of the ironwork drug me up towards the top to see the three people walking into the frame. I just would have opened up the shadows where the three people are, just so it became a little bit more obvious what you were leading me to. But I thought, what wonderful observation and cropping.
Okay, thank you. Tourist scored 21. So for the open category, we have 16 accepted images, starting with At the Gym, Jeff Lipschitz, Box Full of Luck, Bill Banning, Columns, Stuart Wilson. Cycling Home, Chris Seaton. Don't Try This, Bruce Straits. Faded Beauty, Zoltan Pushkash. Floral Fantasy, Bill Charbonneau. Fly Away, Ines Roberts. Gone to Seed, Ellen Clark. Hope for Those Prisoners of Opinion, Dave Basso. Inversion, Bob Rottenberg. Old Spanish Nights, Ron Williams. Orange Dust, Sally Berry. Storm Over Bodie, Bob Wagoner. Surf Is Way Up, Dude, Spencer Dean. And Tourists, Judith Barrett.
All right, that brings us to the people category. And our first image here is Boy. Steve Sherrill, this is for you.
This is a very nice image. I really enjoy it a lot. The black and white works very well. The tonal range is excellent. I like the expression on the boy's face, and the tilt of the camera really adds interest to the composition. Overall, the composition is strong. The focus is good. Good control over depth of field. The eyes are super sharp, and the paint or the tattoo, whichever it is very interesting, very compelling, very eye-catching. I hope it's not permanent, but anyway, that's another good topic. But anyway, it's a very, very good image. I like it a lot.
Okay, thank you. Boy scored 23.
Our next image is Can I Get My Check? Brent, this is yours.
I love this shot. I love her expression. I'm not quite sure about her shoes. My eye keeps going down to her shoes, and they don't seem to be. They seem a little out of place. So I played around because of the intensity of her eyes. I turned it into a horizontal and cropped at her waistline and above her head. And I didn't feel like I lost any of the environment that way. Her posture is still very strong. The intensity is there, and it's a little more focused on her personality rather than the environment. But I love the little moment that was captured.
Okay, thank you. Can I Get My Check scored 23.
Next image is Dancing in the Stars. Chris, this is your week.
You know, the performance not only of the visual but also of the techniques, I thought was spot on. My only comment, and one of the things that when I work with compositing, when I work with putting things together, using photography to create illustrations, I'm always reminded, look at the light source, and then look at the direction of the shadows. And we have these rays and flares emanating from the light source across her face, coming towards us. But then when I look at the shadow on the ground, they don't agree. And that's just a minor, because the shadow should be coming towards me. But besides that, I think this is amazing. I mean, I couldn't even get close to anything like this.
Okay, thank you. Dancing in the Stars scored 22.
Next up is Ed on Coda. Here's to critique.
Is that mine?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. This is a good human interest shot. It tells a story. It's a hard life trying to live on the streets, but some people, including this gentleman, seem to make it work somehow. I think I would have brightened his face a little bit. I would have lightened his eye. He's only got one eye looking out from underneath that hat. But it is in focus. His eye is in sharp focus. And I think that when you shoot in the bright sunlight, you usually get a very contrasty image. And I think that this image could have benefited a lot from opening the shadows up. And then I would, if that wasn't enough, I would have gone back in and I would have painted in some more exposure on his face and right down to his eye. And I think that would have improved it quite a bit.
Okay, thank you. Ed on Coda scored 22.
Our next one is gliding. Brent, this is your critique.
It's a picture that I would never have taken in my life. I don't know quite what to say about it. I like it. It's not the way that I see. I think compositionally it works. There's strength. I might have allowed a little bit more room as she's swimming out of the frame, but I like the way the light is, the ripples and the surreal effect of it. I think the low contrast works well with it. In a perfect world, maybe her shirt would have hit her bottom just a little bit more. I don't know, or revealed more.
Okay, thank you. Gliding scored 21.
Sorry about the delay. There's a long delay between when I'm moving here and when you're seeing it. So this next image is Goleta Pier at sunset. Chris, this is yours to critique.
I thought the image creates such a wonderful narrative. We have the metaphor of the road, the journey, and down the road we see a couple engaged in taking selfies, and then we see another couple further away. I love the little dapple light on the boardwalk in the foreground. All I would have done is I just would have accentuated the dappling across a little bit more of the boardwalk, just to pull us into the frame a little bit more. Nice, very nice.
Okay, thank you. Goleta Pier at sunset scored 24.
The next image is Have a Nice Day. Stephen, this is yours.
Now, here's a happy fellow. He appears to be from some indigenous population. If you look at his clothing closely, all of his clothing and his hat appear to be handmade, definitely not from Macy's. He obviously knows he's being photographed and he's turning on the charm. The composition and exposure and focus are good. But I would like to see that orange band that's crossing over the top of his head gone. I think it distracts from the overall image. It could be cloned out, but it would be a lot of hard work. If any of you have ever tried to select fur or hair, it's not easy. But I think if that orange band were somehow eliminated, that it would make the image stronger. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Have a Nice Day scored 19, 1-9.
Next image is Helping Hand. Brent, this is your critique.
Beautiful little beautiful little moment. I like the intensity of her focus as she drops off. I love the guy's tattoos. It just adds creates an interesting juxtaposition. I'd like to see maybe the background vertical. I know that if we did that, the drop off might be not quite as dramatic. She wouldn't be canted as far forward, but the moment's perfect and the intensity is great. And I like the human interaction. So nice job.
All right, thank you. Helping Hand scored 22.
The next image is Proud Leader. Chris, you're up.
If I had to pick a black and white image of the whole group that I looked at, this is truly stunning. It's beautiful. One of the things that I really enjoy about this portrait is that he wasn't looking directly into the camera. In other words, all the other portraits that the face is straight at the camera, if you can just turn the head just a little bit, I like to use the idea of he's looking at me out of the corner of his nose. Just that slight face tilt creates so much more depth and dimensionality. With the short lighting, the highlight being on the far side of his face, the beautiful shadow detail on the near side of his face, the way the hat creates the separation of the background. I mean, this is a wonderful portrait of a beautiful person. And I also like the POV of the camera. The camera's slightly lower. It does give him elevated stature over the viewer, something that a proud older person would exude. And nice job, nice job.
Okay, thank you. Proud Leader scored 25.
Next up is rehearsal break. Stephen, this is yours.
Judging from the title, this young lady is likely a dancer or a performing artist of some sort. And you can tell that she's tired and that she's taken a rest after some pretty hard work. The body language is good, but if it were mine, I think I would have moved her to the right so that she is facing into the frame instead of out of the frame. And I think the lighting is kind of flat on the subject. And I think a little attention could be given to sculpting the skin a little bit, maybe some dodging and burning. And I probably would increase the exposure just a little bit, the whole thing. And that might help bring a little detail up out of the darkness of her hair and her clothing. But I think that if we brightened her skin or worked on it, like I said, with some dodging and burning, it would really make a big difference. The one thing I would do for sure is that brightly colored slash on the right, I would clone that thing out entirely, because we know that two of the things that draw in a viewer's eye are sharpness and brightness, and that is the brightest thing in the image, and that is not the subject at all. So it's a great shot, and I think a little bit of touch-up would make it much better.
Okay, thank you. Rehearsal break scored 21.
The next image is Stonecutter. Chris, this is yours for critique.
How dare anybody stand on top of the arch like that?
Mhm.
But to me, this reminded me of an Instagram image, an image that is look at me, look where I am, and I think it handles it quite well. It's a little bit. I would say the black point is a little bit light for my taste. I might lower the shadows just a little bit, and maybe just drop the luminosity in the sky a little bit. But then again, that's a personal taste. And I'm so happy that they didn't put him directly in the middle of the frame. They resisted temptation.
Shooting Mount Whitney then scored 21.
Okay, so that brings us to Stonecutter, Arles, France.
To me, I love the concentration of the stone mason and the piece of art. I just am curious why the window panes in the background are such strong visual elements. I don't know how we could push them away. I don't know if depth of field. I don't know if you could have made the window darker. It's just that I don't want to see the window frame. I want to see the artist, craftsman, the chisel, and what he's working on.
Okay, thank you. Stonecutter, Arles, France scored 23.
All right. Next is Sudden Downpour, and this is Stephen.
This reminds me of some caves I've been in where the water seeps out of the ceiling. There's one I was at in Hawaii, and I think there's another one up in Zion. But whether or not the water is coming from inside or outside, the lighting and the silhouetting of the people works very nicely. The lighting makes the falling water really pop out. I think the high contrast in this instance works very well, and I'm happy that the photographer chose not to pull shadows up, pull detail up out of the shadows. I know you can't usually pose tourists, but it would be fun if you could get all four of those people to be looking up, like the gal
Mhm.
in the foreground on the right.
Okay, thank you. A sudden downpour scored 22.
Next is Sunrise, and this is Brent.
I I didn't spark to this image. I think that it would work stronger. I think it would be better if the blacks were truly black. If the detail that we do see in his hat and in his hands were to come down all the way. I'm not sure if the canted horizon, how that works. I would also probably crop in a little bit tighter and eliminate the sky on the right-hand side to keep my eye in the center of the frame, or to keep it from drifting up there. Yeah, so I would take it all the way to a silhouette. Maybe straighten out the horizon and again, eliminate the sky at the upper right.
Okay, thank you. Sunrise scored 20-0.
Next image, This Girl Can Surf. Chris, this is yours.
What's interesting is the choice of aspect ratio. It appears almost square. You know, to me, living on the coast, Patagonia, I've drooled over the Patagonia catalogs over the years, and all of my friends are surf photographers, and the one thing that resonates with me is you know, the rhythm of the ocean, the sound of the ocean, the movement of the ocean, the way a surfer can take the fluidity of the ocean and turn it into energy. And this just seems to be frozen in time. And to me, things aren't frozen in time. I am over photography is about sharp things. I would allow some movement of the ocean, allow some movement of the surfer. And I think it would be more representational of what's going on. The other thing that I want to think about is what was the title again?
This Girl Can Surf.
Okay, so to me, the POV, in other words, where the camera is, we're looking down upon her, almost in a draconian sort of, and I think we really need to be looking up at her or looking at her, and that means being in the water. That means being in a boat in front of the break, and I think it would just elevate the sheer, you know, dominance of her and in her craft itself. I can't tell if I know I've seen things about, there's been some surfers, there was a movie about a woman, a young girl who lost her arm, and I can't tell if she lost her arm in the wave or she is one of those single arm surfers. If she is the single arm surfer, I would make it more obvious, and if she has an arm, I wish I could see a little bit more of it. And I
Okay.
still can't tell. I mean, I still can't tell.
Okay, this, thank you. This Girl Can Surf scored 20-0.
This is Wandering In. It's
Breaking up, Bill.
it's a title is Wandering in the Rain, and it's critiqued by Stephen Sherrill.
Thank you. I really like the feeling of this image. I've attempted shots like this before myself, and using a shutter speed of maybe a 20th of a second, and walking behind people who are moving. it really is hard to get a good image. And oftentimes when I'm trying something like this, I'll shoot in a slow burst mode, because you're always going to find one image that's better than all the others. But I think this image is very successful. It's intentionally blurry, but not too much. And with the muted colors, it looks like an impressionistic painting. Well done.
All right, thank you. Wandering in the Rain scored 22. So for the people category, we have 13 accepted images. The first one is Boy, Bob Rottenberg. Can I Get My Check, James Folsom. Dancing in the Stars, Stephen Sherrill. Ed on Coda, Pat Birdsell. Gliding, Carrie Topliff. Galita Pier, Zoltan Pushkash. Helping Hand, Judith Barrett. Proud Leader, Jeff Lipschitz. Rehearsal Break, Chris Seaton. Shooting Mount Whitney, Ken Pfeiffer. Stone Cutter, Arl France, David Basso. Sudden Downpour, Spencer Dean. And Wandering in the Rain, Bill Charbonneau.
Okay, this brings us to our final category before one video that we have, but this is our prints. The judges viewed these from hard copy 8.5 by 11, and the first is critiqued from Brent Weinbrenner. This is Crash Landing.
I love this image. The print is beautiful. Well, you got to feel for the pilot of this plane because it was a hard landing. I don't know that there's anything that I would change. Maybe just a tiny bit more breathing room around it, but the execution of it, it's tack sharp throughout. The whites are white, and it really resonates with me. The storytelling is wonderful. It's a great print.
Okay, thank you. Crash Landing scored 24.
The next image is Mesquite Flats Dunes. Chris Broughton, this is yours.
I love the idea of black and white sand dunes. So automatically this is going to win. But a couple things. I think you can push it a little bit further. I think you could lighten the highlights of the sand dunes a little bit more. And it's okay that the sand dune shadows go a little bit darker, allowing it to be a little bit more abstract, featuring the shapes and the textures of the sand dunes. The other thing too, the sky naturally gradates and polarizes as you go north. I just might try to even out the right and left-hand sides of the skyline itself. And be careful, because I've been on Mesquite Flats, and I don't know if we're having a curvature of the earth moment, but I think that horizon line has a little bit of a bow to it. And I don't remember it bowing like that.
Okay, thank you. Mesquite Flats Dune scored 24.
The next image is Seaside Quartet, and the critique is Stephen Sherrill.
We don't see a lot of these triptychs and whatever you call them, a quadrotic.
It's called a polyiptych. More than three is polyiptych.
But I think that black and white really makes this work. And the exposure and the composition and the contrast work really well. I noticed that the upper left and the lower right are more similar in tone. And conversely, the lower left and the upper right seem to relate more to each other. But it's really, really nice. I like it. It's very enjoyable.
Okay, thank you. Seaside Quartet scored 24.
Next, next image is urban terrain. Brent, this is yours.
Nice print. The color fidelity was, I think, spot on. It was very natural representation of it. The image itself didn't resonate with me, but the print was beautiful. I'd like to see something more to grab me to draw me into this. I see the the layering of demo, old building, proceeding to newer ones, but I'd like to see something more inside that picture.
Okay, thank you. Urban terrain scored 20, 2-0. So for the prints category, we have 3 accepted images. Crash Landing, Ron Williams. Mesquite Flats Dunes, Ron Abels. And Seaside Quartet, Bill Banning.
All right, that's going to bring us to our final unscored submission category. This is entitled Moonrise. We're going to ask each of the judges to comment on this. I'll just get it started here in a second. Just again, a reminder, the judges had a chance to look at this on Flickr. You can too. It is in the club's Flickr gallery. It's the only image in there that, for right now. The sound and video may be really problematic in Zoom. All right. Judges, comments on this?
The first thing is I would put the camera in motion, or I would pan. And even I know if you don't have motion control for the camera, you could pan across that frame or up and down in that 45 seconds to give it an additional element so that horizon is moving. Oftentimes you'll see cameras in motion with these nightscapes. So that's the first thing I would do. And my sense is I would terminate it before we got into the kind of the slow shutter at the end and just not deal with that exposure variability.
I was just interested on why it ended abruptly. In other words, it seemed like it had this wonderful introduction, and then it just kind of like stopped. I understand it was titled Moonrise, and I agree with Brent. A former student of mine, Michael Shane Bloom. They've all got cameras that are panning with the time lapse, and just like a nature photograph, if we're comparing it to what we got. But I thought for maybe the first video that I've seen from your group, it was fun, and you're right, it did play better on Flickr than it did over Zoom. It was much smoother. Mm-hmm. The transition was much smoother.
I'm not
go ahead, Stephen.
I'm not a videographer, but I can't think of a tougher assignment than to try to put together a video in a minute or less. You've got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end in less than 1 minute. That's a hard assignment. And I have seen some of the videos that the club has produced in the past, and that's been a problem. for some of these videographers. But this one, I liked it after the first 5 seconds. I liked the music. I
Mhm.
liked the sky. I liked the movement of the stars. And I really, really enjoyed it. The ending was a little rough, but for the most part, it was very enjoyable. I think it was very well done.
Yeah, I don't know how it was shot, but presumably it's a big file, and the videographer could have panned 30 degrees across that horizon in the 45 seconds we were looking at it. And that might be too rapid, but just having that bit of motion adds an element of dynamism to the whole thing. And that's what everybody's doing now. So.
All right. Well, that wraps up our presentation for tonight. What terrific work by our club members and the judges. We learn so much every time. I want to say thank you, all three of you, to take the time to prepare, and we really appreciate it. We've got a couple of things coming up. I'll remind you that July is our last month before the month off in August. The program night in 2 weeks will be Williams doing after the golden hour, discussing night photography. And there is a challenge that you'll be learning more about when the angle comes out tomorrow. For Fourth Tuesday, we're going to ask club members to submit 1 or 2 of their favorite pictures for the year for non-competitive scoring, not for the year, for all time. And if you're a participant in the exhibitions, we think maybe of your favorites, you should do one that was accepted and then a favorite that wasn't. Chris, what are you holding up there?
I can't have enough books. This is a fun little series. And it's full of amazing portraits. And a couple of those portraits that I saw tonight could go in this book. So
Awesome. Well, Brent, Chris, Stephen, thank you again for everything.
Thank you, judges.
Thank you.
Thank you, judges.
And we'll call it quits for tonight. Take care,
Okay.
everybody.
All right.
See you in a
good night.
couple of weeks.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Anya.
So.